The biggest mistake is yet to come. If we continue on the path we are with the Iranians, they're going to wind up with a nuclear capability just like North Korea and one day have a bomb. He's about to make the biggest mistake of his presidency.
Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina saying a nuclear Iran will be the biggest mistake of Mr. Obama's presidency. Let's bring in our panel. On the left, Rick Ungar, co-host of the Sirius XM radio program Steele and Ungar and senior political analyst for Forbes.com. He joins us from Newsmax New York, and returning from Newsmax Washington, Republican consultant Ford O'Connell. Rick, I asked Ford about this earlier in the program. I'm going to ask you. We're hearing some talk Lindsey Graham is going to run for president. Do you think he will? And is that pointed criticism part of launching that campaign?
Well, I would hope that's his reason, because it's the most fascinating thing, JD. Look, I don't want a nuclear Iran any more than pretty much any other sane person would. But what amazes me is the reason we went into these negotiations was to avoid exactly that. Now, I don't know what information Lindsey Graham has that I don't have, and I keep pretty well up with this, but there's been absolutely nothing to suggest that these negotiations would be considered a success if they ended in a nuclear Iran. It's like he's making up this meme and presenting it to the world as a fact. It's not a fact. I don't know how the negotiations will end up, but I guarantee you that they will not end up in a deal if it means a nuclear Iran. So, of course, he's launching a presidential career, which, by the way, nobody on his side or my side is taking seriously at all.
Rick, you have a lot of faith in President Obama on this one, and frankly, not a lot of other people do. And while the president's made many mistakes on foreign policy, this could be, without question, his biggest mistake. And forget his presidency, this could be a problem for everyone, including the next president.
What is the mistake?
As you know,
What's
Iran's the baddest actor on the block. They despise the very existence of Israel, and they back a lot of terrorists. And the last thing we need is a nuclear bomb in these guys' hands. So let me tell you something. I want to do whatever it takes to stop it, but I do think that diplomacy is the way to go. But I do think that we need to be putting some checks and balances on these guys.
You just mouthed exactly what they're trying to create as a meme. What have you been told? Give me one example. Well, no, let me finish. What have you been told that suggests that that's what we're negotiating for?
Let me explain something here, Rick, and I think that it's important to note this. Alan Dershowitz has political sympathies much like you do. Yes, Alan, despite his preference for President Obama, was on this program saying a nuclear Iran would mark the Neville Chamberlain moment of Obama's presidency. Point, so if he entertains that notion, why is it a partisan meme? It's a legitimate concern.
Guys, it's not. Wait, let me ask my question very succinctly. I agree with that statement correctly. Now, would one of you tell me what you are being told to suggest that is where we are headed in these negotiations? Just aside from the fact that you don't like President Obama.
More reports are coming out that Iran is getting closer and closer to the capability of a nuclear bomb. They're not stopping this. They're getting closer to it. And it's in every press outlet. I mean, that's what we're hearing, Rick. And that's
really?
undeniable.
Now,
whether or not that's 100% factually true, I don't know.
Well, there's something else at work.
Wait. You can't say it's undeniable and then in the second sentence say it's whether it's factually true, I don't know. That is my point precisely.
He was referring to specific press accounts that he didn't cite chapter and verse.
Which ones?
But certainly the atmospherics, and we'll give you 30 seconds to answer this part, Rick, lengthening the negotiations, pushing the deadlines out. For a lot of us, it doesn't look like diplomacy at work. It looks like kicking the can down the road where the technology finally comes to fruition for Iran.
Guys, I'll say it again. If this were in any way to result in Iran being any closer to nuclear capability, I'm going to be back on this show agreeing with you 1,000%. But until you can show me these press releases or whatever, because I read the same ones you do and maybe even more, unless you can show me those, all this is speculation by those who don't want the president to have this conversation.
I just have to say this, Rick.
That's what it is.
We're gonna, if you want to hear more from Rick Ungar, we're going to hear from him in a second. But also tonight, he hosts the Daily Wrap, 6 p.m. Eastern on Newsmax TV. There's more ahead, so stay tuned. Back now with our political panel. from Newsmax Washington, Republican strategist Ford O'Connell. And this bears repeating. The man in the middle of the screen who leans to the left, Rick Ungar, will be hosting the Daily Wrap tonight, 6 o'clock Eastern, right here on Newsmax TV. It's Rick Ungar, the co-host of Steele and Ungar, Sirius XM Radio, and senior political analyst for Forbes.com. And maybe since Rick has to take over the host chair tonight, Ford, he jumped in to moderate this discussion a little bit earlier. We're just having a free-flowing discussion among friends. Rick, since we got you a little exercise with the last segment, let's talk about another foreign policy controversy, and that has to deal with Bo Bergdahl. We're hearing reports he's going to be brought up on a desertion charge. The Pentagon spokesman denies it. What about Bergdahl? Do you think he'll be charged with desertion?
You know, it's really confusing, JD. I mean, first thing, we all heard the same thing yesterday morning, that these charges were coming. And then, as you correctly point out, it was denied. I don't know what's going on. My sense is that he will ultimately be charged with desertion, but that it will be, his punishment will be lessened by the amount of time he spent when he was in possession of the bad guys.
What about that, Ford?
Wow, Rick, you should join Jen Psaki as a spokesman for the administration on this front. What Admiral Kirby said was there's no timeline on it, and the reason why there's no timeline on it
he did
because
say that.
they don't
You're
want
right.
the media to basically hop on it. This is about blocking the media, not about actually charging with Bo Bergdahl with desertion. And frankly, given the whole Bo Bergdahl trade, the Obama slogan should be capture an American soldier, get some jihadis back, and by the way, let's do this in public. That is unbelievable.
Well, if it is a ploy to keep it away from the media, Ford, I guess you'd have to agree with me that it's not succeeding very well, because here we are talking about it.
We had a guest
Well,
earlier.
don't worry, we're talking about it right now, but how much legs is this actually going to have until the next thing blows up, or the next person's beheaded on YouTube, or frankly, the next Super Bowl ball's deflated? Who knows?
Super Bowl football
I love
deflation.
how you did that.
That is interesting. And boy, it's attracted a
Thank
lot
you.
of attention. We'll save that for
You're
later
all
in the
right.
week, since it's going on not far from my old congressional district this weekend. Other items in play that we need to talk about in a much more serious vein. Mention was made of the Japanese hostage. We're hearing now Jordan is going to go ahead with a swap. I know we can point to Israel and what they did to get back the young soldier Shalit a few years ago. But does ISIS really believe it has a chance to swap prisoners? And will they swap or just go ahead and kill these guys anyway? What do you think, Rick?
The first thing I think is it's probably not up to me to tell Jordan what to do. The notion of prisoner swaps is as old as time, so that in and of itself isn't shocking. Would ISIS take the prize and still kill them? Maybe. ISIS is a pretty sick little organization, but if they're thinking ahead at all, no, they wouldn't do that, or it's not going to help them ever in the future. So I don't know. This is one that's tough for me to weigh in on. I'm not Jordanian.
Ford, though it is not the announced position of the Obama administration, what we've seen in recent months, basically, are we engaged in these swaps? Bo Bergdahl for the 5 terrorists at Gitmo and so on down the line?
It's not so much that we're involved in these swaps, it's that we're involved in them out in the public. And even with Bo Bergdahl, which was apparently a desertion situation, the administration is trying to take credit for bringing home a soldier who, by the way, deserted, and I left that, and I traded back 5 jihadis who, 30% are probably going to go back to the battle. I don't like the fact that this is taking place in public. We used to have the good sense to keep it private so that at least we could actually look like we were upholding our policy of not negotiating with hostage takers?
Very quickly, Rick.
I actually agree. I agree with Ford's point about keeping it private. I think he's absolutely right about that. But I will say this about Bergdahl. Here in this thing we call the United States, nobody's guilty of anything until they're tried, number one. Number two, we have this old adage that we've always lived by, leave no man behind. I think it's a little dangerous when we start messing with those rules.
Well, we know we're not going to leave you
Leave
behind.
no man behind so long as they don't desert.
Rick Ungar is not going to desert us.
Jury,
Here's the deal, Rick. You're going to get your say tonight. Time's up now. Daily Wrap, 6 o'clock Eastern. It's Rick Ungar hosting that here on Newsmax TV. Watch that, and we'll be